I just want to raise a very quick point coming from an angle of political philosophy and ethics, essentially in terms of the roles or the interactions between individuals and states here. It's very tempting to talk of great power politics and characterize Ukraine and what's going on right now, the invasion that is, as purely an event or manifestation of great power politics. But ultimately, they're individual citizens who are suffering the consequences of not just great power politics, but also of the choices of a few select privileged individuals. They're imposing the will not only upon the people in Ukraine, but also amongst many in Russia who do not agree with the war, who do not agree with what's going on in Ukraine right now, and yet are bearing the consequences and the mantle of the repercussions of sanctions and other forms of alienation and isolationary measures adopted against Russia. So I think it's important to separate discussion of the people from the state, and furthermore to recognize that there is agency and that people deserve a recognition of their own voices, their own agency, beyond merely castigation or labeling of them as the tools, as the products, as the subjects and vehicles of great power politics. That's the point I wanted to make there. Thank you.
Of course, the biggest thing that we see is that Putin and Russia should have learned from the lessons of the US and how things unfolded in Iraq and Afghanistan, to realize that it's obviously much easier to go and invade a place, but the kind of hostilities and the conflict that unfolds continues for much longer, and the kind of resistance that you see goes on much longer. I just want to touch upon a few points here. I think firstly, in terms of global governance institutions, right? What does the conflict mean in terms of like rethinking global governance institutions and their influence and actual ability to step in when there's a world crisis like this? The second, I wanted to bring the aspect of gender and gender and leadership. And I think a lot of people have made this point that if you had a woman in power, maybe you wouldn't have something like this happening. I don't want to make such a gender statement, but I think just going forward, it's important to think about how are we building young talent who in the future you have young women who are also leaders in decision-making powers, who are heads of state, heads of companies, so on. The third is a great point was made on the private sector and the role that they can play during conflict. I think it's very important, the current conflict, along with the pandemic and the VUCA environment we're living in, for companies to stop and think about, of course, not just profit, but performance with purpose. And I think we are seeing that happening, where lots of companies now are looking at ESG frameworks, the impact on environment, society, governance, but how can we mainstream that more going forward, and the role that they can play. And I think the other point I want to touch upon is just the importance of crisis management and conflict resolution, and not just training people in it, but like even within public, private sectors, how is that as a theme being developed? And lastly, I think the importance, and as a young person who's here to share their thoughts, I think the importance of global programs, initiatives that bring together young people who are going to be positions of power 20 to 30 years from now, and to train them with a mindset which is collaboration based. Professor Mahbubani mentioned the Asia Peace Institute. I'm part of a program called the Schwarzman Scholars, where the vision is to kind of get people from all parts of the world to engage with China. So I think like more such programs are required, so that hopefully in the future we have people in leadership positions who can deal with things more responsibly and collaboratively.
That makes